Hey folks, welcome to another video in my Hammock Camping 101 series. Today we're going to talk about how I pack my backpack when I go hammock camping. Let's get to it. Now this may be obvious to most, but it took me a few times hammock camping to realize that I wanted to pack my gear in a special order, in a special way, in a special place in my backpack to make things a little easier and more convenient when I get to camp and I'm unpacking my gear and setting up my hammock. Because what I was finding was that I was having to dig into my backpack and looking for that gear, needing to set up my hammock. And as a result, all my other gear was just laying all over the ground. Well, I didn't want that. I'm trying to take better care of my gear and I just don't want to lay it all over the ground. Now, this may not be a big deal for you. You may not care that your gear is laid all over your campsite. Or maybe you put your gear on a butt pad, or you put it in a chair, or whatever. Whatever works best for you. But I find that the way that I pack my backpack helps keep me a little bit more organized at camp and when I'm unpacking my gear and setting up my hammock. Especially when the conditions aren't ideal. So I could be rolling into camp and it's raining. So I want to have quick access to my tarp and stakes. That's the first thing that I'm going to pitch. And then this gives me a dry environment for all the rest of my gear while I'm setting up my hammock. Or maybe you roll into camp and the ground is wet or it's muddy. Or maybe you have one of those campsites where you have that dirt or dust that just seems to attach itself to everything. I don't want to expose my gear to that. So I think these are some tips that will be helpful on how to pack your backpack and make things a little easier, keep you a little more organized when you get to camp. So I thought I'd look at some typical gear that I would take on a 3-day backpacking trip when I go hammock camping. So let's go look at that. This is what I would generally take on a 3-day, 2-night backpacking trip. For these type of trips, I will use my smaller backpack. That is my Gossamer Gear Kumo 36. It's a 36 liter, and that's really all that I need for a 3-day backpacking trip. That will include things like my Ursack, which will carry all my food. I like this over a bear bag option. I know it is a bit heavier, but sometimes just I get lazy and not wanting to hang a bear bag at night when I get to camp. So that is super easy. Some places require you to use a hard-sided canister, but this is what I'll be able to use for most of my trips is the Ursack. I have my clothes bag. In there I'll typically carry a puffy, a beanie hat, some gloves, an extra pair of socks, as well as an extra pair of shorts and a shirt for camping at night when I go to sleep. For rain protection, I've got my Frog Togs jacket, which I love, along with a Dyneema pack cover to make sure all my stuff is nice and dry. Here, I just typically have just a regular, little cloth to help wipe things off. This is a butt pad that I use on trail. I like this one because it can lay out to a couple feet. So I can kind of lay down on my back if I'm, taking a break for lunch and just want to rest a little bit. This is my koozie for my stove. It's got my pot, fuel, everything that I need to cook a meal is in there. This is my little ditty bag. So in that, I'll have things like toiletries, medical supplies, sunscreen, a chapstick, extra battery pack, cords, things of that nature is what I'll keep in my little ditty bag. And then I have my water filter. I use the Katadyn Be Free, which I love. And I also carry a 3-liter bag as well. Because a lot of times when I get to camp, I just want to make one trip to the water, and I'll use that, bring all the water into camp, and then just filter it as I'm there. And I have a pillow. That's a Sea to Summit Eros, which is great. Love that pillow. Here is my tarp and my stakes to go over my hammock. And then here is one of my hammocks that go into a double-ended stiff end stack, along with my whoopee slings to hang it from a tree. And then you'll see this is my underquilt, which is a 20-degree underquilt, which works for most of my trips. And then I have the 30-degree top quilt, which again, that 30-degree works for most of my trips. The first thing I want to pack are the gear items that I want to keep dry. And you'll notice that I have a malafine bag in my backpack. It's a waterproof liner to protect my gear. You can use a trash compactor bag or some other type of waterproof liner, but it just gives me a little extra protection for my gear. Because I'm paranoid about my stuff getting wet. Because these items that I'm about to pack, if they get wet, my trip is ruined. So I'm very conscious about trying to keep them dry. So that's the first thing you'll see that I'm going to pack are all the gear items that I want to keep dry and stuff into this waterproof liner. The second thing you'll notice is that I kind of pack in reverse order of how I'm going to unpack and when I actually need the items. So the first thing I pack is my underquilt. You know, I don't need this. This is the very last thing that I hang in my hammock setup. So that's the first thing that I'm going to put into my backpack. Now you'll notice I don't use a stuff sack, and that's for a couple reasons. One, it's a little extra weight, which I don't think that I need. But two, when you put things in a stuff sack, you don't allow it to kind of fill the nooks and crannies of your backpack. So by keeping it out of a stuff sack, I'm able to press it down and fill all those different gaps that are in the bottom of my backpack. So I don't use a stuff sack. The next thing I'm going to pack is my top quilt. Again, I don't use a stuff sack. I'm just going to start shoving it and pushing it all in down. And you'll notice that it kind of starts rising up. And that's okay, because some of the other things I'm going to put in here are going to begin to press it down, and then I'll compress it down once I seal it up to make the most of the space that I have in my backpack. So those are the first two things that I'll pack is my underquilt and my top quilt. The next few things I have is kind of like a sleeping pillow that I just kind of shove down there in the side. It goes in between my quilts. And then I have a clothes bag. Typically I'll use this as a pillow or some support underneath my legs. That goes in there. And then my hammock, which I do keep in a stuff sack because it helps me hang it without it dragging in the dirt. And typically I can pack this side by side of my clothes bag. And press that down, it gives that a little weight. And then really, that's it. That's all the stuff that I have that I want to absolutely make sure I keep dry. So once that's in there, then I will seal up my bag. And I'll roll that up. Kind of press down, get the air out like that. And then to keep this from popping up, what I'll then do is put in my food bag. So this is my earth sack. You know, I've kept up to 6-7 days of food in this in an odor-proof bag inside. And I don't care if this gets wet. This is waterproof. I mean, it's meant to be outside in the elements. And I like keeping it separated from my other items that I want to make sure are clean and dry. So that's why I put that on top of that. All right, well, that's everything that I have for inside the pack. My next step is to look at what comes in the outside back mesh pocket. So I continue to use the same type of thinking as I want to be able to easily access the stuff in my backpack if I need it. like I talked about earlier, my tarp. I want to be able to get to this fast and easy. So I'll slide that over along with my stakes, as well as my hammock suspension. For me, my whoopee slings. And now I've got easy access to that. And if you'll notice, I'm going to start packing like almost in columns because I want to be able to reach and get the different things that I need. Next would be a pack cover. So I know I have my waterproof liner, but I'm super paranoid about getting things wet. And so I keep that. It's only a couple ounces. And then my Frog Togs rain jacket that I have, I put that in there. So I put that right alongside my tarp. So in case I'll need to grab it if it starts raining, I have easy access to that. Then finally, I have my cook pot here. It's got fuel, stove, everything that I need. I typically don't use this until dinner time, so I will just put that there in the bottom because I really don't need that till later. And then I have my ditty bag, which has just a lot of the small, little things that I may need throughout the day. And I want easy access to that, like my med kit, toiletries. Boom, I have that in my back mesh pocket. So the middle's packed, the back is packed, and now I've got a couple of side pockets I want to utilize. This is where I will pack my water filters. I will generally carry 2 with a 3-liter bag for camping. And I'll just put those in the side. And I like that because when I do fill it up and it comes up to here, I can use some of the straps to help strap it down so it won't fall out. Next is the other pocket, and this is where I'll put my seat pad. Again, I want easy access to the seat pad as I am taking a break, stopping for lunch. I want to be able to access this quickly as well. And then really all I have left are kind of these front pockets. This is where I'll keep a water bottle if I want some type of flavored drink with my dinner. I'll carry that. I have little hip belt pockets where I'll keep snacks, chapstick, sunscreen, small little knife. Again, things that I can easily access. And really, that's it. That is how I pack my backpack. And this is what helps me be a little more organized once I get to camp. So when I get to camp, the first thing I'll pull out are my hammock suspensions. I need to put those onto the trees, and that'll allow me to begin accessing my hammock. So that's the next thing that I need is my hammock. So I'll just come in here, I'll pull out my food bag. I don't really care if that gets wet, so I throw that on the ground. I roll my liner, and then boom, I pull out my hammock and I can begin to hang that. Next, once my hammock is put up, then I can put my clothes bag into my hammock. I can start pulling out my quilt, throw that in the hammock and let it uncompress. My pillow, blow that up. And then finally, my underquilt. And I can begin to hang that and let it uncompress underneath the hammock. So I've found that this is what works best for me when I get to camp and kind of pulling all my gear out, keeping it a little bit better organized, and helping me with my setup when I'm setting up for my hammock. Now, obviously, there are a ton of different ways that you can pack your backpack. I think you just want to consider the things that you want to access while you're hiking the trail, and then how you're going to access the gear once you get to camp. So this is what works best for me. These are the pieces of gear that I have found that I reach to most often during a hike. I'll keep most of that on the outside of my pack, as opposed to the stuff that is inside my backpack that I'm not going to need until I get to camp. And then once I get to camp, I want to unpack it in a certain order so as not to have everything just laid out on the ground, getting muddy or dirty or whatever. But again, you do what works best for you. I just hope that these are, some tips or some guidelines that you can consider when you're packing your backpack for your next hammock camping trip.